Hello everyone, Mystery here, and today I'm bringing you the Darktide melee tier list. All melee weapons, all marks for all 5 classes, circa October 2025 edition. This is going to take quite a while because we've got a number of changes to go over that have occurred since the last time we met and discussed this topic. There have been a number of buffs and nerfs to a lot of melee weapons on the roster. There have been buffs and nerfs to classes. 3 different classes, the Zealot, the Psyker, and the Veteran, all saw pretty big overhauls with this last patch. And of course, there was a massive buff to the Crusher, who is everyone's favorite carapace armored dude, and he is going to be sort of a specter looming over this conversation with a mace raised above his head, ready to crush your balls. He is going to be the gatekeeper for many a weapon in terms of advancing to these upper echelons. So if you can't beat the Crusher, you're not going to be in the upper tiers. In fact, I'm going to put him up here in this top corner, and this is the line that he is going to defend. If you can't beat the Crusher, then you're not going to be one of the best weapons in the game, and that's the rule right now. So speaking of, how are we going to rank these weapons? Well, today we're approaching it from a different angle. With the previous tier list that I just put out, perhaps you saw it, perhaps you didn't, go check it out. The range tier list, there's really only a couple factors to consider with ranged weapons, and that is how much damage can they deal to how many enemies at one time, and how efficient are they at doing it in terms of their resources. And if you got good ranks on all those, you're an excellent weapon. For melee weapons, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You not only have to be good against both hordes and individual targets, you should be able to be used against bosses and elites and armor and non-armored and whatever else. You also have to have a good move set, as well as having good mobility to allow your user to move around the battlefield, because you need to actually close the gap to enemies. There's lots of different factors that go into deciding whether or not a weapon has it, and I'll be talking about those specifically as we get into it, but our rankings today are how you feel when you're using this weapon. And that means our lowest ranking, if possible, is I'm useless. If you're using one of these weapons, you are just not going to feel like you have any power at all. Many a enemy will just take forever to kill or completely reject your efforts and attempts to kill it. And these weapons are so far behind the power curve that they fundamentally have no way of catching up. Even if you make a build entirely around them, there's no way that they're going to have comparable power to any other weapon in the list, because they're just that nerfed. They're just completely ignored and completely devalued based on their base stats alone usually. The second tier we have here is I'm kind of useful. These weapons excel at generally one thing. They are very good at hordes, they are very good at bosses, not both. They can do something, whatever it is, pretty well, but not all that well, and you could be excused for using one of these weapons if you are very good, or you're memeing, or you just want to have a build that has kind of a niche weapon in it, but you're not going to find as much general utility out of these weapons, and honestly for most of the game you're probably going to be kicking yourself for not choosing something that's more generally applicable. Our third ranking tier is I fear Crushers. These weapons are pretty solid in all aspects except when it comes to carapace enemies, and Crushers, this is where they are holding up their hand and saying, nope, can't pass. Sorry, short stuff. You got to be this tall to ride. Because Crushers are completely carapace armored and have 6,500 HP on Damnation, which means if you can't deal any damage to armor, you're going to be all there. They're all damn day. And a lot of weapons can clear Crushers at this point, thankfully, but there's also a lot of weapons that can't, and they're going to exist here or lower. Then we are going up to the second highest tier. I'm prepared for any fight. These weapons are very solid. They can get through the Crushers. They can cut down the bouncers at the door and get into the club, and they can do some serious work, right? They might not be the absolute upper echelon, but they have the stuff that it takes to get into the most high difficulties in the game, such as Havoc. You could clear a Havoc 40 with these weapons no problem, but it's going to fall a little bit behind the ultimate tier, the weapons that have everything, that have been, just gifted the universe by the design team at Darktide, and that is, I am going to kill God. These weapons are the ultimates. They are the best of the best on their classes. They ignore the penalties of armor. They just completely clobber enemies and knock them to the ground. They do excellent boss damage as well as horde clear. These weapons have it all, and so if you're looking for the absolute supreme weapon that will just face roll any difficulty you're playing, this is the first place you should be stopping. Beyond that, I don't think I have too much else to say about the rankings. Let's begin placing weapons, and of course we have one very interesting thing to discuss, which is there are new weapons in the game. There's new melee weapons that have been added with this update. These are veteran weapons, the power falchions, and I suppose let's just go ahead and start with these guys. The power falchions are the relic blade, the one-handed relic blade of the veteran, and they have a power gauge, unlike the regular power sword, which activates for a small amount of time and then deactivates and has hittily damage when it's not activated. These things have a fairly high damage when not activated, and then they get only a mild boost when they are activated, although this boost does allow them to cleave armor a little bit better. These weapons are fairly respectable in their capabilities, right? The ability to stay empowered for much longer means they're much better in terms of dealing with mixed hordes and metal, and they do have two variants. One variant, I can't remember, I can't distinguish the two of them. I think this is the original variant that you start with, and this is the alternate variant, but the variants just switch the priorities of wide sweeping strikes and strike down strikes with your light and your heavy attacks. So if you want to go with more sweeping attacks, you have one option. If you want to go with more heavy strike down attacks, you got the other option. These weapons are appropriate for all difficulties, but they are by no means like all that powerful. I would say that I would place them in high I fear crushers territory. They are certainly capable of clearing into havoc territory, but the thing I will say is if you're bringing one of these weapons, I would highly advise, since it's a veteran weapon, I would highly advise you bring crack grenades, because getting attacked by 2 crushers or something like that is a death sentence if you're using these weapons and you don't have a ranged weapon or a grenade that can get them off of you, because this thing just cannot fundamentally deal with them with any speed at all. It is not like the Power Sword Mark 6, which we'll get to. So that is where I place these new weapons. I think they're fine. I think they're very comfortable to use, but they just don't have the oomph that it takes to hurdle over that crusher line currently. And let's go ahead and touch on one other weapon that we have seen a little bit of a change to with this patch, and that is the power maul. The power maul is the ogryn's worst weapon, or was the ogryn's worst weapon, and got a big rework with this patch. So now this weapon is much more responsive on its individual attacks. It has a completely new weapon combo chain associated with it, and the weapon special got swapped out. It no longer is able to be activated on every attack in the same way the power sword can, but it instead has a 10-second internal cooldown, and when you get this charged up, you can basically drop the hammer on enemies and deal a huge wallop of damage that has a massive AoE. This AoE can scale with the ogryn's AoE increasing talents. It can also apply various effects to enemies, such as brittleness, such as fire, depending on what blessings and which talents you use. And it, of course, knocks down all enemies. They remove the ability to stagger bosses, but it staggers all enemies in a big circle around you, and it can almost kill crushers and things like that instantly with a fully charged thrust on your talent tree. So this is a very solid weapon for Ogryn these days. It's not his best weapon by any stretch of the imagination, but it is very, very capable, and I think it's best used in terms of a weapon swapping build where you have something to do with your range weapon. You know, Rumbler Ogryn would really, really like this weapon. But it can be used straight up. Like it has enough stagger, and that offensive, the empowered blast is very, very impactful for creating space. And of course, this weapon has Skull Crusher. Skull Crusher, which I'll flash on the screen here, in fact, I'll put it in the corner so that you can read it all game, and I keep referring to it. Skull Crusher is one of a couple blessings that will move a weapon up a tier. If a weapon has access to Skull Crusher, it is almost always going to be a very, very good weapon, because if it can stagger, it can activate this ability. And when this ability activates on enemies, it makes them take at least 40% more damage that this can stack multiple times. And so we'll come back to this in the future and talk about other weapons that have access to Skull Crusher, because this is one of the blessings that can make your weapon be very, very powerful in Darktide currently. So look for that on your weapons, guys, when you are crafting out there in the wild. Now, we'll move from here to talk about a couple other ogryn weapons while we're at it. These are the 3 bully clubs, and the 3 bully clubs also have access to Skull Crusher, although they are not all created equally. These weapons are variants on one, they are marks of one weapon family, but they have, for some reason, non-equivalent stats, and what has happened is that this mark right here, the Mark 1, is so far behind. Sorry, this is the Mark 2. The Mark 2 is so far behind the other two because it just has a worse moveset and worse stagger that it just doesn't really have any reason to justify its existence currently. I don't think it's useless because it still has high base stats, and the ogryn can take it just about any weapon and make it usable in melee. So I'm going to give it the kind of useful tier, but this, if you're choosing a bully club, you should be steering away from this bully club. This is the worst one for, for all purposes, because the attacks are not the right orientation, and they just don't deal the damage they need to. However, we do have the Mark 1 bully club here, which has strong, heavy strike down potential. That's what you'd use this weapon for. And due to a change to the ogryn in the most recent patch that has nerfed the talent batter, has made it so that heavy attacks apply 4 stacks of bleed and you get only 1 stack of bleed for light attacks. That has made this weapon a little bit more viable as compared to its brother, the Mark 3. But I don't think it's made it like, absolutely crazy. However, it definitely still clears crushers. I'm going to put it in the I'm prepared for any fight tier. It is a heavy single target attacker, and it can clean up like light hordes and stuff like that, but you're going to find yourself heavy attack spamming over and over for those heavy strike downs with the weapon much more than you will with the Mark III. The Mark III, on the other hand, is going to be our first absolute god killer. Despite the nerfs to batter, this is still one of the strongest melee weapons in the game. It is absolutely ogryn's strongest melee weapon. Maybe only compared to like one other, but nah, I don't think that's even possible. This is ogryn's strongest melee weapon. It penetrates armor on heavy attacks. Heavy attack 2 is a very strong armor penetrating ability. Light attacks 3 and 4 are strong armor penetrating, and it has double the stagger that the Mark 1 does on light attacks, and for some reason its light attacks are like faster than the other marks, so I just don't understand in which way that is balanced. What happened to this weapon is that, with the lack of stacking bleeds with batter as easily, you'll just have to open up with a heavy attack instead of a light attack. And that's okay, because a heavy attack comes out very quickly, has incredibly high stagger values with this weapon, and it'll put an enemy on the ground, and then you can finish them off from there. This weapon has absolutely zero problem clearing any content in the game, and if you're looking for a strong primary in the ogryn, this is the go-to currently. Next up, let's talk some chain swords. The chain swords actually received a little bit of a buff with this patch. They most notably got a buff to the way that their chains, their actual revved up animation deals damage. Previously, you had to stick that all the way through to really get any damage out of it, right? So when you stuck into like a Reaper, this enemy is fleshy, and so what would happen was you would like deal like 1 damage, 4 damage, 6 damage, and then it would like blow up, and like the last couple of ticks of the sawing animation would deal 95% of the damage. So you really had to hold the whole time, which made you incredibly vulnerable. With the new change here, what happens is on non-carapace armored enemies, you start dealing incredible damage right away. So you can cut those enemies down much more quickly. And the other really big change for all chain weapons, which will be reflected in this patch, is that when you finish killing an enemy with an activated chain, whether it be the heavy attack swing or the special, you are freed immediately. You no longer get stuck in encumbering animations, although there is still an element of problem for these weapons, but these weapons are able to do much better as a result. The chainswords previously ranked pretty dang low down because these weapons, the problem that they have is that they are very, very fast. They deal some pretty good damage, but they have next to zero impact. And with a weapon like this, where you really want to land the blow and not have something attack you while you do it because you need a second to chainsaw on them, that does kind of that does kind of limit your potential. These weapons take too long to kill crushers, in my opinion, which is why I'm going to put them in the I fear crushers tier. They're definitely better than the I am useful, or I'm kind of useful tier. These are generally applicable weapons now that'll do fine in most content in the game, but when you come up against a crusher, they are just going to take far too long to bite through the armor and get anything done. The most effective way to use these things is to run up to enemies, activate the weapon special, and tap them one time with the Bloodletter perk that'll just put 16 stacks of bleed directly onto an enemy. And that's a pretty fun way to use them. Although I think there's just better chain weapons out there. I think they're just fine where they're at. The buffs have helped them quite a bit because they also got direct damage buffs. The actual chain swords, just to help them out, because they were the lowest in terms of chain weapon performance across the whole board. While I'm on chain weapons, let's go ahead and talk about the Zealots Eviscerators. The Zealots Eviscerators have gone up a lot. They have appraised quite a bit since last time, and the reasoning behind that is they are some of the only weapons that are able to deal with armor effectively, like the chain weapons that can deal with armor. The revved chain on these things will cut through crushers. It'll insta-kill bosses from like 50,000 HP, right? These things absolutely destroy with a revved animation. And the fact that they changed it so that no longer do you have to do this fun little trick where you charge in the middle of the revving animation. You can now just charge ahead of time like a normal person. And yeah, it's just so much easier to use. These also have just generally pretty good damage. The one downside of these things is they have terrible dodge capacity, and the Zealot is really a class that relies on his dodging. If he can't dodge, then he's missing out on a lot of damage, and these things have a dodge count of like 3. So you will run out of dodges very quickly as compared to playing with a lot of other weapons. You'll feel less mobile as compared to playing with a lot of other weapons, but you can still pump pretty damn hard. Like, I won't lie, these weapons will still do an absolute ton of damage. I think they're definitely better than the single-handed chain swords, and they will stagger enemies. They can sweep across hordes and stagger and kill everything in the horde. So I don't think you should have any problem using these weapons into the higher difficulties in the game. I think they're perfectly capable. I just don't think that they are, they're not the kings of the class because they're just too immobile to really play with it at a very, very high level. At the very highest levels of Zealot, you need to be incredibly mobile to be effective. Okay, going from there, let's go and talk about the Crusher. The Crusher is a weapon that I think I ranked pretty highly previously. The Crusher is a very capable weapon, has some good blessings on it, right? It has Skull Crusher, it has Slaughterer. These things can stack its damage very, very aggressively. The problem is that this weapon has always sucked against Crushers. Ironically enough, the Crusher sucks against the Crusher. And that means that with the doubling of the Crusher health, this thing is hard gate-kept from being relevant in a lot of content, because if you come up against one Crusher, you might be able to kill him if you're playing the Zealot and you can use your charge to overcome that armor damage reduction from the Carapace. But if you're not, if you're playing Arbides instead or something, man, you are going to have a hell of a time dealing with enemies with this thing. And I know a lot of players who were using them before, were just kind of making it work because the push stab does okay against Crushers. But yeah, after the change, these things are just like working all damn day in order to get that stuff done. And I would really just love to see this weapon get a little bit of love to make it not so damn jank. I feel like the activatable ability on this is next to useless, and it's pretty much just a big stick that you bonk stuff with. Yeah, I'm going to give it the I Fear Crushers tier. It's definitely being held back by that Crusher gatekeeping, and I wish the best for it in the future though. Let's go from there and talk about the Shock Maul. I'm keeping like one element in common, and this Shock Maul kind of looks like this, right? The Shock Maul is a weapon that has jumped up a lot in my appraisal over the years. This weapon is very unique in this game, and especially if you're playing into Havoc difficulty, this is a great weapon, honestly. This weapon has a 90% damage efficacy against Carapace. So like, it doesn't have the highest base damage in the world, but it armor penetrates like nothing else. It makes no sense to me that the Crusher has like next to 0 armor penetration, but the heavy attacks, like the heavy one on the overhead on this one and the second attack on this one, they just penetrate 90% of armor for no discernible reason. Add this to the fact that this weapon has the shock prod, which can be used to tell bulwarks. They need to stop putting their shield up or immobilize any enemy, or even multiple enemies at a single time. It also just evaporates bosses' shields. And of course, these things have Skull Crusher. There's some of the best utilizers of Skull Crusher in the game. So if you don't have an ogre on your team, if you run one of these on one of your humanoid classes, they can help to apply that Skull Crusher effect to bosses and targets and just really, really lay them out that much quicker. I'm going to give both these weapons the I am prepared for any fight tier. They do take a little bit of a learning curve to get used to the fact that, yeah, you won't be killing stuff instantly. It's not the freaking dueling sword, right? But they do have solid damage and, more importantly, I think, solid impact so that you're staying safe when you're fighting stuff. So that you can keep stuff away from you. The Arbides is a very, very competent user of this weapon, and yeah, it's definitely like his most team-focused weapon. It's not his strongest weapon, but it is his most team-focused weapon. You can also use it on, just any other humanoid class can use it, and it's pretty good on all of them. But yeah, I definitely think it's one of the more solid picks in the game right now, especially considering some of the very unique things it brings to Havoc. Speaking of not unique weapons, we got to talk about the combat axes. I've got 3 of them there. Where's the last one? There it is. Okay, so we have the Atlas, the Antax, and the Rashad here. And these weapons have fallen off so hard in terms of their viability, in terms of their usability over the course of the game's lifespan. When the game initially came out, the Antax and the Rashad were some of the strongest weapons in the game because it was just like straight unga bunga damage. The Antax or the Rashad with brutal momentum were just easy ass ways to just clean up hordes. Their base damage was super high. There just wasn't that much stuff in the game that you really had to worry about in terms of like health values that you needed to pump into to the point where like these weapons, as long as you could kill shotgunners and gunners and the occasional mauler by chopping them in the body, you were good, right? That is all really not aged super well since even the time where I started making content for the game. That has aged pretty damn poorly. And yeah, the way the game has gone now is you cannot afford a weapon that like barely does single target effectively. The worst of the bunch here is absolutely the Atlas, which is going to be put into the useless category. This weapon forgoes the talent or like the ability to deal damage that the other 2 have. So this one, the Antax, I'm going to put it in the kind of useful tier. This weapon can clear like low tier games just fine. Occasionally you'll see a bot spawn in with this weapon, and it's honestly the best weapon that bots can have because it has pretty solid impact and high light attack damage. So if you're just like a really new player and you're playing on Malice, this is a great Malice weapon. But yeah, it isn't going to be able to do anything outside of those difficulties, because the first time it runs into an armored enemy, you're just done because the heavy attacks do almost nothing. Now the Rashad here, it falls into the same sort of category. The Rashad has a much higher damage profile for dealing with single target enemies, so it can deal some pretty decent boss damage. It can honestly do okay, I guess, against crushers, but I do not think that it would ascend past the I Fear Crushers tier. The Atlas, by comparison, has like the exact same statting, but it has a moveset that completely guts it. That makes the strike downs and stuff that this weapon would use to kill to kill elite targets gone. It removes them from the moveset. So the moveset actually makes the Rashad or the Atlas like 2 times as bad as the Rashad is. I am going to put the Rashad. I don't think the Rashad is anywhere near on the tier of these weapons, where these weapons are currently these days. I'm going to put it sort of at the top. I try not to do vertical rankings within the tiers, but I'll say it's at the top of kind of useful tier. I just feel like it is a very boring weapon that can contribute one thing, which is repeatedly heavy attacking over and over. And there's so many better weapons at doing that, and it just like it can't pump the damage that it needs to in order to be competitive these days. So yeah, kind of useful. Axes brings me to the tack axes, and the tack axes I ranked very highly in my last patch or my last update. The tack axes are some of the most pumper weapons in the game. Like, they have incredibly high DPS because they attack very fast. They have that critical bonus as one of their stats, which means they have a high base crit and also an increased critical hit damage stat. And that means that, yeah, as far as fleshy enemies and bosses and stuff, they'll absolutely tear through the health bars. The problem is that as soon as you run up against armor, they are done. Like, they could get through things like crushers before, because just by sheer force of will, they would just, like, you know, ram their head into it. If you're playing Zealot or something, you could use your charge and get a pretty solid attack out of it. If you get a crit on a crusher, you'll deal a couple hundred damage. And before, with 3,500 HP on a crusher, that was okay. Now, with 6,500 HP on a crusher, that's not going to cut it, because you'll be there working on them for like 8 to 10 seconds, and that's not good. So I'm going to have to put all three of these guys into the I Fear Crushers tier. Now, if you're interested in which ones I think are the best, this one right here, which I believe is the Mark 7, is the best of the cleavers. And then, in my personal opinion, I feel like the blue one was the one that I liked next after that, followed up by this one down here. Yeah, they're just going to run headlong into crushers and be stonewalled by them, which sucks. So yeah, that's where I'll leave them for now, because crushers are just bad imposing, guys. It is a really big determining factor for the game currently. All right, let's go to the relic blades from here. We're going to do relic blades, and we're going to do the force greatswords. I feel like they're like kind of cousins. They came out at the same patch, right? The relic blades are very solid weapons. They are exclusive to the Zealot. And the relic blade is one of those weapons that it really relies on you knowing what you're doing when you get into combat, because with this weapon, there is really no escape. It has the same fatal flaw that the eviscerator does, which it is a slow weapon, right? It's got a limited dodge count, and it has all the utility you'll need to fight the fight once you're in there, right? You can do some very impressive stuff with this weapon, such as using the activation window of the blade to perfect parry any attack. That is, you know, a high skill sort of thing, but it has the power to stand toe-to-toe with many enemies. The problem is that as the game picks up, the amount of enemies that the game will throw at you at one time, it almost necessitates you like kiting back and making space. And for a class like the ogryn or the arbis, they can use their abilities to like hold the line and push the enemies back and keep them on the ground and keep them staggered. The relic blade can kill a certain number of enemies. It can, like, you know, 1v3 or whatever, like crushers or something. But when you've got a massive horde coming at you, you really need to have that mobility. And as you might be able to tell, the one thing I think is holding this weapon back is its mobility, its lack of mobility. I think it's absolutely got the numbers for days. You've got two different variants here that are kind of similar in a lot of ways to the way they set up the power falchion, where there's one variant that's overhead strike downs and uppercuts. The other one is more of a left-right easy slashes. I think this is the slashy one. This is the uppercut overhead one. So it is configurable in a way that you can kill crushers with it. So it's definitely able to be in this tier up here, whereas where I'm going to put it. But I just don't think it's ascending to that killing god tier, because it is yeah, it's just not where the absolute upper tier of power is currently, right? There are weapons that are more powerful on the class. There's weapons that are more powerful in the game, and I don't think it can stand toe-to-toe with those in terms of damage or its overall like ease of use. Now, a weapon that I do think is in the upper echelons, the very, very upper echelons of the game, is the Force Greatsword, however. The Force Greatsword is on Psyker, which is a big differential that we have to talk about between the Psyker and the Zealot. The Psyker is a broken class, right? And the Psyker gets to have this weapon that not only has crazy fast attack speed, but has a 3x modifier. Like, you'll do triple damage if you get a critical headshot, and this weapon can push like 70% crit if you put a crit blessing on it, even just one crit blessing on it. This weapon can also use deflector if you are interested in staying a little bit more defensive, but you know, perhaps more importantly, you can apply soul blaze on every strike. It's just a very, very solid amount of damage output throughout the game. It's also a very fast weapon. It lacks dodge count a little bit. It has a 4 dodge count as opposed to, like, honestly, that's not that bad, right? Like a dueling sword is like 5. So, like, yeah, this weapon is so much more light and fleet of foot, and combine that with Scryer's Gaze, I think this weapon is perhaps the Psyker's if you're going melee Psyker, this is absolutely the strongest weapon on Psyker, right? The base damage of it is so high. The critical multipliers, the finesse multipliers, both headshot and critical, are so high. And then you get these bonus abilities like the ability to push stab. The push stab on the mark, man, I can never tell these apart. I believe this is the initial mark that you start with right here. I can never tell the marks apart, but I believe the push stab here, it does like 1.5 times the damage of an overhead strike down, and it can like take half of a captain's health. If you knock their shields off, this can be your boss killer. You can stab a burgle in the weak spot and absolutely annihilate them. It's got an amazing push, a shove that can knock back plenty of enemies. And yeah, this weapon just really synergizes super well with the Psyker. And now that melee Psyker is like 110% a thing that can seriously pump on the class, it's easily one of the best melee weapons on Psyker and one of the best melee weapons in the game. Like if other classes had access to this, like if Zealot had access to this and the way that this weapon plays, they would make crazy use out of it, and the Psyker is seriously able to pump with it too. So I think this one is one of the best weapons in the game. The one thing that it lacks in is it doesn't kill armor, doesn't kill crushers like absolutely the fastest in the world, but I think its overall damage, the ability to nuke bosses and the ability to like slash through hordes, the ability to completely screen wipe with a double charged warp slash is crazy with this thing. So I've always been impressed when I see Psykers that know what they're doing with this weapon, and I think it's at least easily on the tier of a bully club these days. Let's switch from Psyker and talk about the veterans exclusive weapons, the power swords. We already did power falchions. Let's now do power swords. Where's my second one? It's hiding somewhere here. There it is. Okay. So we have the Mark 3 and the Mark 6, I believe their marks are. The difference between these two being the move set, right? They have the same amount of damage on their empowered strikes and all that sort of stuff. The difference really comes down to what one of these weapons can do with a certain special attack that it has. I got them swapped, I believe. I believe this is the Mark 6. Yeah, this is the Mark 6. This is the Mark 3. The Mark 3 is going to go here. This weapon, it has good power. Remember, like, the power is solid. You do need to be activating every time you swing the weapon, which is, you know, the downside, but the power is there. The problem is this weapon has no significant way of penetrating armor. Even when it's activated, it's dealing very small amounts of damage to armor compared to the overall health pool of some of these enemies. The Mark 6 has the solution to that. The Mark 6 is going to go in this tier 1 higher here. It's not every day that I like, over time, a lot of weapons in the same family are going to go in the same tiers, but this one has a special move, the push stab, that allows the push stab and the follow-up light attack. You've probably seen it if you watch my melee veteran build. If you push stab, you'll do a single target thrust with the point of the sword, and that has incredible rending. It will penetrate armor very, very easily, and then you can follow up with an overhead light attack that also has a high amount of rending, and that attack used to be able to insta-kill crushers. It can still insta-kill maulers, and it gets very close to, I think it can still insta-kill crushers with the right setup, right? So this weapon, they both have the same power level generally, but it has a move set that enables it to can opener those enemies that otherwise would be knocking it down. So this one fears the crushers because it doesn't have the move set, but this is a fine weapon to use. The downside here is the same downside we have with you know, things like the relic blade, things like the eviscerator. It's lack of mobility, and the fact that in order to activate it and use it, you have to activate it every 3 swings or so. It's just a lot to manage, right? Like, powerful weapons in this game generally are incredibly simple, right? They're like stat sticks. They just go unga bunga and they beat stuff down. Bully Club being a great example, right? They just beat stuff down. This has that extra level of brain work that you're gonna have to do, and every iota of work that you spend with your brain thinking about, should I activate or like, I need to activate the weapon and then swing 3 times and activate it, takes away from your capacity to process other stuff going on. So that does knock it down a little bit. If it was activated all the time, it'd be the best weapon in the game, but it can't be. Okay, so going from there, let's talk about some Unga Bunga stuff. Since I mentioned Unga Bunga in there, we got to talk about Arbides. Arbides has got these two sword and boards or mason shields here. These things are very, very solid weapons. I'm gonna absolutely give them the I am prepared for any fight tier. I think that they are like archetypically the I am prepared for any fight tier, right? These are the only human-based weapons that can block. Well, I know, I guess force sword. Okay, I'm gonna take that back. They can block bullets. A lot of some other stuff can block bullets too, but they block bullets really, really well, and they are just very safe weapons. They are incredibly fast weapons that can make great use of the Arbides' ability to stagger enemies and capitalize on staggered enemies. Where they lack is they do not have any strong way to like, how do I put this? They're bad at bossing and they're bad at like large health bar enemies. For smaller enemies, right, these weapons just overwhelm most enemies in the game because, like, you know, you got ragers or you got maulers or something on you. You hit them a couple times, they get staggered, and then from there you kill them before they get to do anything else. It only becomes evident that these weapons lack the stacking damage or the overall the ability to just like explode a single target when you get into a long extended duel with, say, like, yeah, you got a plague ogryn following you around. Take one of these weapons, go into the Psychanium right now, spawn a plague ogryn, and just time how long it takes you to kill it. Even with like full setups, it takes a very, very long time because they don't get particularly good like critical ratios or anything. It's just a weapon that has a fairly strong baseline damage set, and it has a nice consistent DPS output that overwhelms most stuff in the game with stagger and CC potential. Of course, the flashbang is incredibly useful. This is maybe one of the best weapons in the game for clutching because you get an extra tool in your kit that says, okay, everything that's like about to get to me, no, stop. And then, you know, you'll pause mutants and stuff doing what they're doing. So yeah, this is an excellent weapon and can get you out of a lot of sticky situations. I just don't think it is the strongest in terms of the Arbides or that level of strength, as compared to the Arbides Shock Maul, which is absolutely a god killer. This weapon is definitionally Unga Bunga. It is just one-to-one this, basically. This weapon still, by the way, has a feature that is apparently intended that when you use the weapon special, normally the weapon special with this weapon hits an enemy with like a shock attack, right? And if that shock attack hits an enemy that's already primed with electricity on them, it'll stun them. It'll hold them still and it'll do a couple thousand damage over the next duration, which is very powerful. Now, if you use this attack and then halfway through the attack you swap to a different weapon, or you swap, like quick swap to your ranged weapon and then swap back, now your weapon will randomly proc that shock effect on enemies without ever having to use the special. And that's still in the game somehow. So that is one feature that I won't be considering that towards its overall power, but it's just extra power that it gets, the ability to randomly shock and immobilize enemies for some reason. But this weapon has incredible attack speed, right? Just a cursory glance at its stats page, it has a 250 damage light attack, a 350 damage heavy attack, and it attacks like twice as fast as comparable weapons, right? So this weapon is just a hurricane of blows. It has some very, very powerful blessings, such as Relentless, which you can stack up to 50% strength when you continue attacking the same target. And this is something that, you know, our shield down here might really be benefited from, is like the ability to stack up that damage when you're attacking the same target over and over helps it deal with higher health pools. And the other one that it wants to use is the damage against electrified enemies, because it's pretty easy to electrify enemies, as you might imagine with this thing. So yeah, this weapon has some really good blessings that are obvious, no-brainer picks. It also has the innate armor penetration. Mace weapons in general, such as our shock mauls here, such as our club here, and this maul here, they have a much lower damage reduction from armored enemies like crushers than other weapons do. And so this weapon will just bonk crushers no problem. You'll kill them in a couple strikes. And of course, this thing has crazy stagger. So it becomes a very safe weapon to play with, because like when you're surrounded by enemies, just start swinging blindly. You'll deal so much damage that many light enemies are going to fall down and die, or you'll just get their heads caved in. Any heavier enemies are probably going to be staggered out of their animations by the stagger of this, and you're swinging so fast that enemies really don't get any gaps to get attacks in if you can hit them as they're coming towards you. And overall, the only thing this weapon falls behind, you know, certain other weapons in the game on is like boss damage. And a lot of that comes down to just the class that it's associated with. If you could use this weapon on Zealot and apply bleeds with it, or if you could use the weapon on Ogryn and apply bleeds with it, it would boost it up a lot. But this weapon doesn't get those benefits because it's on Arbides, but you know, Arbides is strong enough already. But this is just definitely his meta weapon and definitely one of the most meta weapons in the game. And let's go from there, talking about meta weapons in the game, and go the opposite direction. Let's talk about some stuff that has been pretty off meta for a while, and let's make it the Devil's Claw swords. We've got a couple variants here. The Mark 7? Oh, geez, these Devil Claw swords, I can never remember. Or Mark 4, right? Mark 4, This is the 7 with the little at the end, and this is the 1 with the teeth where it looks like it got dented from improper usage. Okay, so the Devil's Claw swords, they are completely cucked by armor, obviously. Like, crushers just completely defeat them. There is a workaround for this, and it's called being the Zealot, because the Zealot gets to have a charge ability that perfect rends on the next attack, so that works. The riposte attack on these is very strong. The ability to permanently block and then parry, it makes them pretty dang usable. Like, the Psyker can use this to great effect because he can just infinitely block and parry, as you might have seen in some of my previous build videos, and the parry damage honestly isn't that bad. The problem with that as a weapon design philosophy is that Darktide isn't necessarily a game where you want to be reactive, where you want to let the enemies hit you first or attempt to hit you first before you can deal the damage to them, right? Letting an enemy swing at you just so you can perfect block them is asking an enemy to hit you, and you know, and you'll try to block them in the right timing. So like, just by virtue of like having enemies swing at you, what if you're like going for parries and then a dog like pounces on you in the last second, right? That's when you get CC'd and get an overhead at the same time. So like, reacting to enemies and blocking them as a means of dealing damage is always going to be far behind just, you know, walking up to them and caving their head in with your heavy 1 and then proceeding to hit them 19 more times where they can get up. So these weapons are going to go way down here somewhere. I am going to give, man, this is the best one in my testing, the Mark IV. That's the one that you can actually get something done with. I think it's just, I am kind of useful. I don't rate these weapons anywhere near on the tier of like cleavers and stuff like that. I just don't think that they have it. Maybe, you know, let me do that. Maybe, let me say that this one can be on that tier. They're completely made ineffectual by crushers. The one thing they do have is they have Skull Crusher on them, but you're not going to really apply Skull Crusher with these weapons. The other two, man, they're kind of useful, I guess. You know, they still have that blocking capability there. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. At this point, you might be looking at this and being like, okay, well, if these, as bad as they are in kind of useful, what's useless outside the Atlas? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we're going to talk about the heavy swords next. The heavy swords are useless. I have no idea how the heavy swords ended up with 3 variants. Oh, by the way, subscribe to Mr. E, guys. I'm prepared for any fight, including fighting to get your subscription to my channel. Probably a little bit late in the video to put that up there, but whatever. Hopefully we get to, you know, some subs out of this. All right, let's talk heavy swords. These things suck. I made a video on it previously. The problem with the heavy swords is that no one has actually looked at the damage values at all. It makes no sense to me how a weapon that has, like, the damage values that these weapons have aren't like impressive in any way, shape, or form, right? These weapons are middling in terms of their damage, and then they have no way to deal with armor. They have one of the worst armor reductions in the game. So when you're up against a carapace armored enemy, if you don't have any like stacking damage on the class or whatever, these weapons are literally dealing single-digit damage to carapace on headshots. Like, a headshot is like 9 damage with these weapons on light attacks. And heavy attacks are taking, I think I counted like 11 or 12 swings, including sometimes you would get crits, which is like the only saving grace. Yeah, these weapons cannot kill a crusher. It's just fundamentally impossible for them to do in any reasonable amount of time. And then the follow-up to that is there's nothing special about them, right? The thing that can make Devil's Claws be like somewhat usable, like I'm kind of useful, is they got that parry thing. They can parry a demon host or a set of ragers or something like that and counterattack them to death. They can, they can do that. That is something that they are capable of doing. These weapons are just pieces of metal that are understated, that don't have any effective way of dealing damage. So there's no build that you would make with these weapons where you couldn't replace it with every other single weapon that's available on the classes that can access these, and it would be better because their stats are just that low. They have low armor penetration. They have low, just low damage overall as compared to what has been released on the classes since. And they're not mobile. They have, I believe, they have 0 mobility. Like, so they are, they don't boost or decrease your movement, which is like, damn, at least give them something. I don't know. These weapons need a full overhaul. They need to be given weapon skills or like moves in their sets that can penetrate armor or something. They are just bland and ineffectual in all meanings of the word, and they belong in the useless tier. Please don't use these. Okay, going from there, we are going to go over and look at the cleavers, because this kind of is in a similar vein. The cleavers are one of those weapons that has absolutely gotten nuked from orbit by the existence of the crusher these days. The cleaver was already struggling with that back in, after January when the ogryn got reworked, and people were using these quite a lot, especially the Mark IV cleaver. I believe it's called the Cork. The Mark IV cleaver is probably the better of all these, or sorry, the Mark, yeah, 4, yeah. This one right here. This is probably the best one of them because it's got the pokey, like you can just stab very quickly, and it can alternate stabbing and punching with to pretty good effect. But there's no reason to use these weapons over anything else, especially now that they nerfed the batter stacks, so you're no longer able to build up bleed with these. What these weapons need is Uncanny Strike. That would make these weapons be viable at all. That's where they're lacking, right? Because we've got this one is the heavy attack, like kind of cleave swing. This one does light attack, like slashes randomly back and forth, and this one does poke. This one, all its light attacks are like, excuse me. Like and subscribe for me sneezing. We got like the heavy or the light attacks are just poking over and over, single target pokes. If you could get Uncanny Strike on these, they'd be good because they deal pretty good against light. They're fine against light, and then they would be able to poke down crushers and stuff, but they just don't have very high base damage. And one of the things that you should be concerned with the most on the ogryn, I believe, is stagger. Stagger potential on the ogryn is really, really big because he has tons of talents that accompany your stagger. So having a high base stagger value means that you're multiplying that further, which means you're putting enemies in your asses, which means you are just absolutely able to dominate the battlefield. And these weapons cannot deal with multiple enemies at once in the same way that many of the more stagger available weapons can, and they don't put out any more DPS than the stagger focus weapons. So what's the point, right? Why would I ever use a dagger over a bully club when this weapon can attack just as fast, but has 6 times or 8 times the stagger value and can penetrate armor? So these weapons are gonna go. I'm gonna go this one kind of useful, right? Because you can like alternate punching and stuff. I think these weapons are all pretty useless, honestly. The last time I saw an ogryn using one of these was maybe 6-7 months ago, because people pretty quickly figured out that yeah, they're like fine against like lots of targets, but you'll just do more damage using anything else at all. And now that they've nerfed batter, these things have been driven into the ground. We got to move from there, and since we're talking about knives on the ogryn, let's talk about knives on all the rest of the classes. I think it should come as no surprise that these are god killers. The Mark III and the Mark VI, respectively, both of these combat knives are some of the best in the game. Of course, they have access to Uncanny Strike, but perhaps more importantly, they are the fastest weapons in the game. These are insane mobility weapons, so it is a perfect accoutrement to any range weapon that leaves you slow and vulnerable. So psychers can use this to reposition very handily, and also get Uncanny Strikes to, like, you know, augment flame staff shenaniganery. Zealots can use this to stupid effect. These have a hidden 20% backstab damage modifier, so you're going to be able to use these with the new Zealot rework to Shroud Field and be a backstabbing god. The reason that these weapons are maybe not the absolute potential that they could be, is they lack upfront damage, but what they lack in upfront damage they make for in the ability to stay positioned properly, and they of course are insanely fast, and they can apply bleeds as well. So there's a lot of classes that aren't zealot that can't apply bleeds, and like so for a veteran, if you take this weapon and you can take your talent that applies 2 bleeds on attack, and then you can just like stack up bleeds super quick with them, and then you can stack Uncanny Strike. You could do the same thing with the dueling sword, I suppose, but this allows you to even more mobility in that sense. And yeah, these are just solid weapons. I didn't want to like say that like, oh yeah, there's like an extra tier up here above that. I think all of these weapons are perfectly equally capable, the absolute best in the game. And yeah, this I don't think it should surprise anybody that the daggers are among the best. We'll go from there and go over to another Uncanny Strike wielder, which is the Blaze Force swords, the Psyker Blaze Force swords. The Blaze Force swords are utilizers of Uncanny Strike. that is what I'll say about them. As far as their prowess individually as melee weapons, I don't think it's all that high. I think that they fit perfectly into this tier right here of I am prepared for any fight. The differentiation that I would draw between the Force Greatswords and the Blaze Force swords is that these swords are not damage dealers, right? They are enablers. The fact that you can use Deflector with them, you can use Uncanny Strike with them. They are great fits that go with the Psyker, but if you're using these, you are not meleeing, right? You're setting up to swap over to your range weapon to then, use the staff. That's what you're really doing with these weapons. They can handle a small amount of enemies, right? But you're not seeing a Psyker who's like topping the damage charts, who's just destroying entire hordes with their Blaze Force sword. It's a good weapon. It can knock out a Crusher in a couple of moves. It has Uncanny Strike. It has things like Slaughterer, right? That nice additive strength damage bonuses that can really boost the Psyker. But the reason it's being boosted is because these things all really help Soul Blaze and help the casting side of Psyker. And so these are very capable weapons, but on the merits of being a melee weapon, they are definitely behind the Blaze Force swords, which just have that raw power of being able to kill outright. Okay, let's talk shovels. There are 2 groups of shovels, quite obviously. There's the 3 on the right, which are for veteran. There's the 3 on the left, which are for ogryn. And within the 2 groups, there's actually 2 groups as well. There's the sort of the haves and the have-nots. Which is funny because they're kind of inverted on the groups. So I'll get to it and explain that here. Let's start with the veteran shovels, right? We've got 2 sets. We've got these 2 that have the flip down animation. Now you hook this is like a 2-part thing. You flip it down and then you hit the enemy with it and it latches in and you rip it out. This one has a thrust strike. You strike with the blade, you just point the blade into the enemy's eye and it staggers them. So these weapons are absolutely blessed, no pun intended, in terms of the blessings they have. They have the best blessings in the game. They have Thrust, they have Uncanny Strike, they have Skull Crusher, right? So like the 3 best blessings in the game, potentially, all on this weapon. The weapon lacks a little bit in terms of its raw, like, power, but it's got enough to keep it there. What I'll say is that I think that this weapon, the Mark 1, is just the best out of all 3 of the veteran shovels. Reasoning being, this one has the most raw power invested in the blade itself. The other ones invest a lot of power away from the actual like swing set and the damage of the strikes themselves and into the weapon special, which is good-ish, but it relies on you to develop, like, to go thrust and go into that. This one, ironically enough, like, these 2 use thrust very effectively, thrust and Uncanny Strike. This one, you can use Uncanny Strike, and you can use Skull Crusher if you want to help your team, but you can also use, there's a blessing on there that gives you 60% weak spot damage after a push, which is actually very effective because your push follow-up stab on this one is like your most effective anti-armor. So you can go like, you can just like push stab overhead a Crusher and kill him in like 3 hits. So this weapon is just generally very effective and easy to use. Just a solid weapon all around. I don't think there's any problems with it. These weapons, But by my own definition, they don't necessarily fear crushers. It just takes a long... I'll put them in fear crushers. They'd be high in here. It just takes them a very, very long time to kill a crusher. And it can kill one crusher after like a good bit of effort, right? You got to start off by first of all getting your uncanny strike stacks up to 5, and then you got to activate the weapon special and hit a headshot after charging to 3 stacks of thrust, and then you still have damage to do after that. This one just is more of an unga bunga weapon that is a decent power level, and so I'll put it up there. The ogryn shovels, on the other hand, are much more obvious where they're at. This one right here is going to go into I Fear Crushers. It's a strong enough weapon in terms of its like overall strike down power. You know, the ogryn is a melee powerhouse, so his melee strikes like hurt a lot. But this one trades out the weapon special for an uppercut, which removes the weapon special that makes the other two so fearsome. We've got the Mark 5 and the Mark 15, or the Mark 19 here. These shovels can like almost insta-kill a crusher, and they can obviously insta-kill like anything else as a result, because you can put thrust on here. You can have what's the thrust equivalent? There's like a talent on ogryn that actually is thrust and adds into this, right? So these weapons, you can absolutely drop the hammer on an enemy and blow them up for like a bajillion damage, and they have pretty damn solid damage outside that too on just like heavy attacks and light attacks. I'm gonna give them both the I'm prepared for any fight tier. I especially like the Mark 19. I think this one has been the strongest pretty much from the beginning, based on what we've seen as far as buffs and stuff coming to the classes. The Mark 5 and the Mark 19 have always been dominant. But yeah, this one like just will absolutely destroy a crusher. I mean, it'll insta-kill a mauler. So yeah, being able to insta-kill an ogryn is kind of a big deal, because like ogryn will get harassed by things like maulers and mutants, and just being able to go like, you're dead is very nice. While we're on ogryn, I guess, and talking about insta-killing, oh, by the way, we have an extra chainsword over here that we don't need. Let's talk pickaxes. We've got Carcelas, we've got Branks, and we've got the one that no one uses. Let's go ahead and take the one and put the one that no one uses down here in I Fear Crushers tier. Let's go ahead and put the other 2 pickaxes up here and talk about them a little bit. So this one, right, is the inverse Goldilocks zone. The reason that the Carcelas is a good pickaxe is because it's for light attack spam, right? Very quick attacks, has enough stagger, enough damage that it can mulch through most enemies without getting hit in return. The Branks is on the far end of that spectrum. You pick a big target that you're going to hit one time and they are going to fucking die, damn it. And you charge up and you go in with that attack and you obliterate them in one shot. And so they both have those sort of ends of the spectrum covered. This one doesn't have anything as a result of that, right? So yeah, it lands itself in the middle, so where it can't one-shot the really big potential targets, and it's not good at like light attack, horde clear sort of spammy attacks, which means it's just right out. These other 2 though are perfectly usable. I think that like Carcelas is probably just the easier one to use, but in the current meta of Havoc, Branks has a lot of usage because it's one of the best weapons at like just absolutely destroying a single piece of metal instantly, although shovels are pretty good at that too. Yeah, so like these are very, very solid weapons that I think any ogryn should be comfortable with, and just know that this one is the odd one out. The Barovian, that's what it's called, that's right. Okay, from there, we can talk about our chainaxes, I suppose. The chainaxes got the rework, or got a little bit of a buff here. The chainaxes are, they're pretty good. They are pretty good. I just don't know if they are high enough to be in this next tier yet. Yeah, I'm gonna say that they're at the very top echelon of I Fear Crushers tier. The problem again with the chainaxe is like, okay, yes, you can kill a crusher with these, but due to the way that the chain works, crushers are the resistant enemy to this sort of weapon. For a mauler or something, 2 heavy attacks will kill a mauler. You just hit him in the body, it cuts through their flak, it kills them instantly. These weapons have insane damage, right? They'll clear most other stuff. But when you come up against armor, when you come up against stuff that just like negates your attacks, they require you to get stuck in with the blade and do your action, and that's where you're just going to get run over by like a quadrillion enemies, versus like more capable weapons that can like, like an eviscerator that can do that damage in half the time because the damage is straight up better, or the power sword that can just poke them in the head and like cut half their health bar off in a second, right? These weapons are just safer at doing what they do, and they'll put out as much damage as this will, but this weapon makes you very, very vulnerable to do the weapon special and use it on enemies in the same way that the chain swords do. I think that the eviscerator is immune from that because like the eviscerator is just has a lot of base damage as well. Like it doesn't invest as much in the ripping except for when you're going for like high single target stuff. So yeah, the chainaxes are way better than they used to be, and they can be used in Havoc. It's just going to be like if you come up against a bunch of crushers, you're going to be regretting your decisions pretty quickly, I feel. Then we will talk about the slab shield. The slab shield is, man, is it a god killer? It's pretty fucking good. Yeah, I'll give it that. You know, the slab shield has appreciated in value again because the batter changes have made it so heavy attacks are back in the menu, like especially mixing heavy and light attacks. This weapon has a big, wide, sweeping front to it. It is one of the highest stagger values in the game, so being able to come at the edge, take the edge and just slam it into a big horde and throw them all backwards and just keep them on the ground and then stack up. Skull Crusher obviously is on this weapon. Being able to further stack bleeds on them while they're on the ground is very effective. This is at the lower end of the God Killer tier, right? It's not as powerful as the Bully Club is if you're going like toe-to-toe and just trying to deal massive damage, but it is very capable, and it does have like special, you know, it's special because it can block stuff, right? It can just like infinitely block any sort of number of enemies and just make your enemies' lives a living hell, like closing in. It's like the crowd control weapon in the game right now. It's got to be the best crowd controller out there because you can just swing this wide and just knock everything down. A capable shield ogryn is going to do a lot of work, and I think that yeah, the changes to batter have made this a lot better and made this a little bit worse. So yeah, I'll give that bump up, and it can be in the God Killer tier. You can at me in the comments if you don't think it's as good as the rest of the stuff is, but I think it's pretty dang close to being as good as the Bully Club Mark III. We'll come from there, and we'll go down, and we'll talk about our last couple weapons. The Thunderhammers. They're kind of useful tier. You know, these weapons just, they sacrifice so much to be good at killing bosses. You know what I mean? Like, they will fall. I mean, you use the Thunderhammer, right? You go into a game using the Thunderhammer, and you're playing as Zealot, and you're playing like Martyrdom Zealot, and you're playing alongside like any number of other players, and you'll watch as like your damage numbers are like lower and lower and lower. You just can't keep up with other stuff in the game right now because these weapons are so slow. They are so hard to use moment to moment, and the ability to blow up a boss in one hit, or like, you know, kind of be able to kill a crusher with them, I guess, just isn't worth it like at all. And they really struggle against armor too. Like it takes a fully charged thrust and a fully charged like, you know, you have to charge, use thrust, use your you know, charged ability on the hammer, all that together, and it just barely kills a crusher, right? So like these weapons are just such a gimmick at this point. They're so encumbering to use. I really want them to be better, but you're just gonna put yourself in a really disadvantageous situation because like dueling sword can just blow up bosses now too with backstab. So can daggers, things that are way more mobile, things that have way more dodge count and stamina usage isn't like completely draining you dry in 2 seconds. And then also those weapons are able to keep up consistently high damage across the rest of the game versus like you're gonna swing your weapon at like a single shotgunner and someone else is gonna run in front of you and kill it before you can kill it because they can hit multiple enemies at one time and kill them. Whereas this thing uses like, it's the heavy sweeps and they do like no damage for no discernible reason. So yeah, this weapon's in a really bad spot because like while it's activated is so much better than the Crusher's base is so much better than these things. And you know, for 95% of the game, you're using the base stats of the weapon. You're not using the special functionality to blow up bosses. If the game were oops all bosses and it's literally just bosses from one wall to the other, that'd be great. And Havoc has a lot of bosses, but you know what else Havoc has a lot of? fucking everything else. So you need to be able to get through everything else in the game in order to get to those bosses to kill them, which means that trading off a lot of that boss killing or even some of that boss killing potential and going for another weapon instead is just generally the better choice. And then we'll round it out with the dueling sword, guys. I'm certain that this should come as no surprise to you, but the dueling swords are still absolutely god killer weapons. These weapons, all three of them, like they've tweaked all of them. The only thing that has changed for these weapons is they have lowered the overall crit finesse ratio, so they don't go to, I think it was like 3.8x damage when you're getting a crit or a headshot like they were before. And they've changed the weapon special from being an offensive thrust that could stagger enemies in the same way that the Mark I shovel does to making a defensive parry. Unfortunately, I think that the parry might actually be a better weapon special, because now when, you know, you're in a situation where before you would have had like 4 ragers come at you, right? And the dueling sword, it can kill ragers, but you got to line up the hit and you might get hit in the process, and you can stagger one, but you can't stagger all 4. Now you just start blocking and dodge back and they'll hit you and you'll counter attack them and you'll murder them instantly because the thing still has such high finesse modifiers. It's still absolutely one of the best weapons of the game, and for all the nerfs that they did to the power potential of the weapon itself, they buffed the classes even more. So whereas, you know, beforehand we had these weapons being probably on par with the arbi's shock maul here. The arbi's didn't get really any changes in his power. These weapons lost a little bit of their own power, but they gained more than that back in terms of the class power. And so now these weapons are the strongest melee weapons in the game for the 3 human classes that can use them, because they can just like blow up stuff like they never could before. And the Mark V, this one, I think, the Mark V has like that crazy dodge distance. It's still a super solid weapon. It has a weird kind of swing pattern, but the damage values are all still there. And so I can't really discount it. I can't put it any lower than that because, yeah, like the light attacks will still murder hordes. You can still heavy attack. It still, of course, has uncanny strike and thrust, which are the 2 elements here that make this thing work. If they removed uncanny strike from this weapon, it would do a lot towards rebalancing it. But unfortunately, as it stands, like the uncanny strike is just the enabler of such high damage. And this is the takeaway, guys. At the end of all of this, a lot of what it comes down to, if you look across the tier list here, a lot of what it comes down to is certain weapon classes, certain weapon families are all grouped up together in the same tier. And that isn't necessarily because, like, you know, they're so similar, but it's because they share the same blessings and the same mechanics. And so if you have a certain subset of blessings, Skull Crusher, Uncanny Strike, and Thrust, those 3 blessings are some of the best in the game. And if those are on your weapons, you're going to be at a higher tier, provided you have other, like, you know, you have a pretty good amount of conveyance of power to the actual weapon. I think the one weapon that is like sort of outstanding on that front is like the shovels. They just don't have very much raw power of their own. They don't convert that player power into damage all that efficiently, but like all these weapons 100% do. That's exactly what they're there for, is they have really high ratios that play into the strengths of the class, and then therefore, like, if the class gets stronger, they get like 5 times as strong relatively. But overall, I mean, we've got a ton of weapons. You know, this is the important part of the tree for most players, right? It's okay if you're playing with a weapon that is afraid of crushers, because in many difficulties, crushers aren't like all that common, right? You can gang up as a team and annihilate crushers, or if you're using the power falchion or the chainaxe and you're playing veteran, you can use a crack on a crusher, right? You don't have to worry about that stuff. But yeah, so I wouldn't be afraid to use anything up here. Stuff down here, though, I would really like to see just revisited, reworked. These are weapons that are been outmoded and outdesigned and are very boring to use, except for the Thunderhammers, which are kind of cool ideas as weapons, but are lacking so much in terms of like the minute-to-minute playability and power that they unfortunately get to be made only kind of useful. And hopefully you agree with the overall tier list. Let me know down below how you're feeling about this one, whether or not you think I goofed on something and put something too low or too high. I appreciate you for watching. Thanks for subscribing and you know, clicking all the ads all the way through, and see you soon. Bye, guys.